In this Sukkot Shir, we're going to plumb to the very depths of the meaning of Sukkot, of where this mitzvah comes from, not in the obvious sense, the pasuk in Parshas Emor, B'Sukkot teshvu shivat yamim, you shall dwell in Sukkot for 7 days, which we know is the source of the mitzvah, L'man yedu dorotechem ki b'Sukkot hoshavti et bnei Israel, so that your generations know that I took you out of Mitzrayim and you dwelt in Sukkot, you dwelt in these booths during the time period in the desert. But we're going to go much further back than that, much deeper down, and try and find the depths, the resources, the wells of water, the springs way underground from which Sukkot draws its nourishment and its meaning and its Kabbalistic foundation, as well as its halachic foundation. What is this Yom Tov all about? How are we meant to relate it? How can we access its energy? How can we use it to transform ourselves, to have a Sukkot unlike any that we've ever had before, and to use this as a transformative method of going into the rest of the year in a way that is different and somehow elevated from any way we've experienced this period of time ever before? That's what we're going to try and do. And so, yes, the origin of the mitzvah is from that pasuk in Emor, you shall dwell in Sukkot for 7 days. And Rashi brings the one view in the Gemara that's not talking about literal booths. It's not that we dwelt in booths, because then it wouldn't have said Basukkot Hoshavti, I caused you to dwell in Sukkot. It would just have said because you dwelt in Sukkot. Hoshavti, meaning I created the opportunity of this dwelling place for you. That implies that what we're talking about are the Ra'anana Kollel, these amazing clouds of glory that were enwrapped around us, that embraced us throughout this arduous journey through the desert. And it's the Ra'anana Kollel that we celebrate on Sukkot, these clouds of glory that we celebrate on Sukkot. And we see this already when the Torah tells us in Parshat Masai that Bnei Israel traveled from Ramses, which is their last place of living in Egypt, in Mitzrayim, was Ramses. They left Ramses on the 15th of Nisan when the redemption took place. Vayachanu basukot, and the first place they camped was Sukkot. And interesting, the Balat brings from the Targum Yonatan there that doesn't mean necessarily that the place where they camped that first time was called Sukkot. Rather, those are the Sukkot we're talking about. Those are the clouds of glory in which they camped. So Vayisu mi Ramses, Vayachanu basukot means they left Ramses and they camped in the clouds of glory, which were called of Sukkot. And this was the origin of the mitzvah, which comes later on, that every year we need to spend Sukkot in a Sukkah. If we go further back to Parshat Bo and Shemot, where the actual event takes place, they're leaving Egypt, they're leaving the town of Ramses, and they're going to this place where they dwelt in the clouds of glory. There again it says, Vayisu bnei Yisrael Ramses Sukkota, the Jewish people left Ramses and they went to Sukkot. And there the Balat makes the comment, and the Balat is such an important figure in our world of Torah. When we think of him as the Balat on the Chumash, which really dwells on some of the numeric values, some of the gematriot, but bear in mind the Balat is the innovator of the system of halakha that we use until this day. The Balat gathered all the halakha from the various different authorities and from the Gemara, particularly the Rif, the Rambam, and his father, the Rosh, and curated it all in one place. That's the Baal HaTurim, the master of the pillars, which later become the 4 sections of the Shulchan Aruch. So this is the foundation of all halachic thinking, reasoning, and decision-making from that time, back in the 13th century, all the way until today. So it's the Baal HaTurim who points out that when it says that they came from Ramses and they went to Sukkot, the way the word Sukkota is spelled, Sukkota meaning to Sukkot, is without a vav, strange spelling, and there's one other place where the word Sukkota without a vav appears as well, and that's back in Bereshit, when Yakov and Esav had just had their famous meeting. Esav had suggested that they reform a united family. Yakov politely turns the suggestion down. Esav goes on his way to Seir, and we're told that Yakov Nasa Sukkota, he went to Sukkot. Lomar, to say, says the Balat, based on the Tanchuma, Shebizchut Yaakov Yatzu Mitzrayim, that it was because of the merit of Yaakov that the Jews got out of Egypt. Now, that doesn't mean that they got out of Egypt because of Yaakov, because we know already from the Brit Bein Abtarim, the promise that was given to Avraham, by Hashem already said they're going to go into Egypt and they're going to be taken out of Egypt. So the coming out of Egypt was inevitable. That was going to happen no matter what. So what does the Balaturim and the Medrash Tanchumim mean when it says, Shebizchut Yakov yatzu miMitzrayim? It's not the fact that they left Mitzrayim. That would have happened in any case. What the Balaturim is referring to is the way they left Mitzrayim, that they left Egypt in these clouds of glory. That was through the merit of Yakov. And that tracks us back to that time where Yakov and Esav part ways and Yakov goes Sukkota. That word Sukkot, that's the moment at which Yakov creates the force that provides us later on with these clouds of glory. He initiates that power of the clouds of glory which manifest many, many years later when the Jewish people are on their way through the desert. Now, what happened in that town, Sukkot, and why was it called Sukkot? So we're told, Vayakov nasa Sukkot, Yaakov went to Sukkot, Vayivin lo bayit, and he built a house for himself. Ulemiknehu asa Sukkot. And for his cattle, he made Sukkot. He made these booths, these barns for his cattle. Al ken kara Shema makom Sukkot. And that's why the name of the place was later called Sukkot, after these barns. And the Ohr Chaim asked, Ohr Chaim, 18th century Kabbalist from Morocco originally, then spent time in Italy, later on came to Israel and is buried on Har HaZeitim in Yerushalayim today, and left us this magnificent work on the Chumash, among other things, which gives a Kabbalistic slant on a lot of what the Torah tells us. And he says, why would you call the place Sukkot? Because he built barns for his cattle there. He also built a building, which was a new thing altogether, to build a building, a home, a house. Call the place Bayit. Why call the place Sukkot? And he says because that was an innovative idea, that nobody until that time had felt concern for the animals and saw the need for animals to be protected by these sukkot, by these protective roofs and walls that kept the animals safe. That was something that Yakov introduced, and it was such an important innovation that the town became called Sukkot because of that reason. And that leaves us with quite a puzzling situation. That means if we track the idea of Sukkot all the way to its original moment, where does the idea really come from? Where did the idea of Sukkot start? What is the foundation of this amazing mitzvah and this beautiful festival that we all enjoy so much? What was it? It was the barns that Yakov built for his animals? Really? Is that what Sukkot is about? There's so much beautiful Kabbalah about Sukkot, and there's so many beautiful feelings and spirituality and halachot about Sukkot. To really think that its origin is the barns that Yakov built for his animals, that just doesn't seem to make sense. What is this all about? Why do we track this down to that moment when Yakov leaves Esav and goes to this place to Sukkot and builds barns for his animals? What is that really, really all about? There's a further question, unrelated for the moment, but we'll connect it, of course, and that's the famous medrash that talks about the fact that Mashal, this is a medrash that appears in Parshas Emor and Bereshis Rabbah, like two people come before a dayan, they go to court, and we don't know which one is victorious. We see one of them coming out of the courtroom with a kind of a trophy in their hands, and we realize that's the victorious one. In the same way, we in the nations of the world go to court on Yom Kippur. We don't know who wins, but then when the Bnei Israel come out and they've got their lulav and their etrog, that's the trophy, we realize that Bnei Israel has won. And it's such a strange medrash in so many ways, but what concerns us at the moment is, on Yom Kippur, did you notice that you were in court against somebody? Was this a civil case where you were arguing with somebody else and one party was going to win and one party was going to lose? I don't remember feeling that way in Yom Kippur. I remember standing before Hashem as an individual, being judged on my own rights, being accountable for my own actions and deeds. I don't remember competing with another litigant for victory in a court case. What is the Medrash talking about? Rabbi Moshe Shapiro, an amazing, very great man who lived in Yerushalayim and passed away only a couple of years ago, who, in order to understand that medrash, refers to a piece of Zohar that is incredibly difficult to make any sense of. But let's have a look at that piece of Zohar and understand it through the eyes of Rabbi Moshe Shapiro in order to understand the medrash, and we'll use that to get deeper into the Sukkot idea. So the medrash tracks the whole Yitzchak, Yakov, Esav story. Yitzchak is old and is dying, wants to bless his son, asks Esav to go and get some hunt and bring some food for him. Rivka tells Yakov about it. Yakov brings some food, which Rivka prepares, and Yakov gets the bracha. Esav doesn't. Esav hates Yakov and pursues him for years and years until they finally meet up and they make peace. The Zohar links that to Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur and says that what Yitzchak asked from Esav was to bring him from the tastes of all the nationalities and cultures of the world. In the literal sense, that means bring me Chinese food and Indian food and Moroccan food and Ethiopian food and French food and every kind of food that you can get. I want the tastes of all the different cultures of the world. But what it actually means in the terms of Kabbalah is he was asking him to bring him the cultures of the world. Tell me what they've done. Tell me what they've achieved and accomplished. What is it really about? What are their deeds? And he sends Esav around the world to come back with this report of the accomplishments of the various civilizations. Rivka tells Yakov about this and tells Yakov, go to your father with the Jewish people's accomplishment, with your own accomplishments. Don't worry about what the world is doing. Just show him your accomplishments. And so Yakov goes into prayer and tshuva and study of Torah and eventually comes before his father. Yitzchak senses the flavors of Yaakov's offering, what Yaakov's bringing, and realizing this is beautiful, this is amazing, this is magnificent. And he loses interest in what the cultures of the world are doing. He finds in what Yaakov is doing such completeness, such totality of purity, that he becomes totally immersed in what Yaakov brings to offer him. And he loses interest in Esav, so much so that when Esav comes, he says, what can I do, my son? As the Zohar says, Yitzchak had already become intertwined with Yakov and completely committed to him and had no interest in giving a bracha after that to Esav. This somehow aligns with the story of the very start of the creation, where the Chazal tell us that originally Hashem wanted to create the world with midat hadin, with a real accountability and justice. He saw the world couldn't survive that way, and he included midat harachamim, that sense of mercy and loving kindness. And here too we have this. Yitzchak is the midah of gvura. This is din. This is harsh justice. You get what you deserve, nothing more, nothing less. And Yakov is tiferet. Yakov is a magnificent synthesis of the gevura of Yitzchak and the chesed of Abraham. And so Yitzchak, who is gevura, asks Esav to bring him all the deeds of the entire world, thinking that Esav is his natural heir. But instead, Yaakov comes, and Rivka finds the need to bring Yaakov, who has that softer side, who has the loving kindness in him as well, to come forward to his father. And then the story is Esav doesn't get the blessing, and Esav hates Yaakov and goes after him for almost the rest of his life. And we have to understand this a lot more deeply. What does this really mean, and what is going on? So this idea that when Hashem created the world, he wanted to do it b'midat hadin, what does that really mean? Hashem creates the world because he wants to do good. Hashem creates the world because he wants to unconditionally do kindness and express love and do good. And so he creates humanity, and he creates the world who can be receivers, receptacles of all the goodness that Hashem wants to shower on humankind. But Hashem realizes in his wisdom that giving things away, philanthropy, charity, is not the ultimate of giving. The ultimate of giving is to enable individuals to earn the good that they receive. There's a difference, you see, between giving as a form of charity and giving as a form of investment. When you give charity, you're not asking for anything in return. When you give charity, you're not expecting anything in return. But when you invest in somebody, you are. When you invest in somebody, you are expecting returns, and there's an accountability for that investment. And it's important for all of us to clarify when we give, whether we're giving to our children or we're giving to friends or we're giving to anybody, to actually clarify in our minds and in theirs, is this an act of charity or is this an investment? If it's an act of charity, I expect nothing in return. I'm giving it to you out of the goodness of my heart. I want you to have it. You owe me nothing in return. That's it. But if it's an investment, then I am expecting something. I want to be your partner. I believe in you. I believe in your growth, and I want to participate in your growth and support you and help you so that you can build your business or whatever it is that you're building bigger and bigger, and I can be a part of it, but you can own it. I want to facilitate your ownership of this magnificent empire that I'm helping you build. That's what Hashem does with us. Hashem is our investor. Hashem invests in us. He doesn't give us charity. He doesn't throw stuff at us. That would be what we call in Kabbalah, Nahama de Kesuf, or bread of shame. Hashem rather facilitates the opportunity for us to build our own goodness, to be able to build our own richness. And he invests in us. He gives us everything we need to build it. All he asks is that we do it, that we own it, and that we take what he's invested in us and we build with that. We create great things with that. That's what Hashem wants from us. And so Hashem creates this world. In fact, Hashem creates two realities. The one reality is this world where you could see the world and explain the world godlessly. There are laws of science and there are laws of economics and psychology and sociology and all the rest of it. And you can explain everything in the world in a way that doesn't include God. Because if that weren't a possibility, then there would be no accomplishment in believing in Hashem and running your life and managing your life according to that belief. It's only because there is a choice. You could see the world in a secular way and see the world simply as driven by the laws of science and by the laws of nature with no involvement of Hashem and therefore no interaction between my morality and my spirituality, my kedusha and my tara, my sanctity and my purity, no connection between all of that and my success in operating the world. That's one reality. The other reality is the second paragraph of the Shema, where there is a direct correlation. And my kedusha and tara does impact my interface with the world and how the world responds to me. What we're meant to be doing in this world is discovering the flow between these two realities. These are two systems. There's the system of the world. We've talked about it before. The Ran calls it the Chok HaElokim and the Chok HaTeva. The rules of the system of God and the system of nature, of science. These are two systems, and they could be seen to operate separately. Hashem is in the heavens and skies, and he runs his world, and down here the world runs by its own algorithms of science and physics, and it just does its own thing. And that's the way a secularist will see the world. That's one way of seeing it. But our responsibility, what Hashem wants us to do in order to build this wealth that he's investing in us for, is to be able to discover and enhance the flow between these two realities, between Hashem's world and the scientific world, between the real physical world and the real spiritual world, and to find that flow, to detect that flow in our own lives day to day, to discover it, to experiment with it, to play with it, and then to enhance it and to grow it, and to use that flow to enhance the effectiveness of the way we live. That's what we're meant to be doing. Esav is the father of secularity or secularism. He is the one who says, who sells his birthright because I'm going to die. There's no will to come. There's no God. There's no anything. Life is what it is. You're born, you live, you die, and that's the end of it. So he is the real atheist, and but a very effective person, and he becomes the secularist, and that's what he is. Yakov is the person who understands the system of God as well. Now, originally, these two twin brothers were meant to work together, and that would be the flow, that Esav would lead the physical world and Yakov would lead the spiritual world, and their connection would be the flow between these two systems. But once Esav decided to go on a different track altogether, Yakov alone had to be able to create, discover, and enhance the flow between these two systems, and that becomes Yaakov's role. Yitzchak in the brachot sees that, realizes Yaakov's capacity, realizes that this is Yaakov's role, and is completely committed to that. Esav is devastated and decides that he's got to get rid of Yaakov, because as long as secularity has a mirror image in the world of faith and belief and Torah, there is an accusing finger being pointed, a discomforting accusing finger being pointed at the world of secularity. And therefore that world of Esav, of the secular, has to destroy faith. It has to destroy Torah and Kedusha, because it just creates too much discomfort otherwise. Now, this battle between the secular world, the world of Esav, and the world of Yaakov that integrates the two systems and sees them as one system, that's the battle of Yom Kippur. That's the battle, Moshe Shapiro explains that's the battle that's taking place on Yom Kippur between the nations of the world and ourselves. And it's in that battle that Hashem is going to decide for each of us as individuals and our families and communities and the Jewish people and the world. Are we going to operate based on a purely physical model and therefore the harder the work, hopefully the more success we get. It's just a matter of cause and effect in a very physical sense. Or are we going to incorporate Kedusha and Torah into the world and create flow between the scientific world and the spiritual world and create a oneness, one system, that system of the second paragraph of the Shema? That's what we're fighting for on Yom Kippur. We, Yakov, are fighting for a worldview that has integrity, integration, a worldview that sees the oneness between the systems, that brings the systems together with proper flow in between them. That's where we want to see the victory. Now, the story goes on, of course, that Esav goes off in his own way, and eventually they come together again, and that's the piece that we're talking about. So Yakov and Esav now meet. Yakov gives Esav gifts, and in Kabbalah there's mentioned that those gifts that he gives him is secular knowledge. He says, you take it. You take the universities. You take science. You take philosophy. You take medicine. You take it all. You become the expert in that area. That doesn't mean we won't engage in it, but that's not our area. Our area is going to be in the integration and the flow. Our area is going to be in Torah. And Esav says to Yaakov, maybe we can do this together. Nis'a v'nelcha v'elcha lenegdecha. Let's walk together. And very politely, Yaakov says, no, that's not going to work. He has to separate from Esav. And that's quite interesting that in this whole picture of the models of these, of the secular world, the physical world, and the spiritual world, and the flow between them, what's important is that we're not part of Esav. We can engage in this physical world, and we can discover the flow and live the flow, but we can't be partners with Esav. We can't be influenced by Esav. And I mentioned in Shul on Yom Kippur, based on a beautiful shiur of Rabbi Yoshe Ber Soloveitchik that's actually on YouTube, how there's a pivotal moment on Yom Kippur between Mincha and Ne'ilah, just before the Haftarah of Yonah, where until that time we'd been involved completely in Prishut, in developing ourselves, being concerned about our own tshuva and our own standards, our own status in front of Hashem. And then the Maftir Yonah comes and we start taking care of the world again. And I talked about this impermeable membrane, the semi-permeable membrane around us, a membrane that allows us to influence the world around us, but protects us from the influence of the world around us. And that's Jewish engagement in the world. We engage, we make a difference, we want to contribute, but we don't want to be influenced. We want the influence on us to be pure, to be from Torah, to be from Kedusha, to be Tahara, to be from Hashem himself and not from any other source. And that, in a sense, is part of the Hoshanas. We go around the bima every day of Sukkot, except for Shabbat, with our lulav and etrog, we say, Hoshana, save us. And it's saving us from the influence of the 70 nations of the world, the 70 cultures of the world. And the 70 cultures are categorized into 7 lots of 10 cultures each. And each day we remove from ourselves the influence of 10 of those cultures. The first day we remove 10, that leaves 60. The second day we remove another 10, that leaves 50. Until Hoshana Rabbah, where we're finally divested of all of the influence of the cultures of the world, and we're left with our own culture. And again, that doesn't mean that we're insulated from the world. We engage in the world, but we engage in the world from a perspective of enhancing the world, uplifting the world, giving meaning and purpose to the world, but not taking influence from the world as much. And this separation of Esav and Yaakov is a crucial part of Jewish life. It's part of why in the yeshivot there was always resistance to introducing secular education into the yeshivot. That didn't mean that people, Torah scholars, didn't study secular knowledge. Many of the great Rishonim and Achronim, some of the greatest minds in Torah, were also brilliant minds in various areas of science and medicine and philosophy. But there wasn't an interference. They were kept somewhat separate. You studied Torah in a purely Torah environment where you're completely immersed in only pure Torah. And then if you needed to study philosophy or medicine or science or whatever, you went to study that. But it in no way adulterated the way of thinking, the methodology, the purity of the way we reason in Torah and the spiritual depths we get in Torah. So when Esav suggests, let's create a partnership again, Yaakov says, no, thank you, and turns to this place later to be known as Sukkot. And what does he do there? He builds a building, a house, and he builds a Suka. What is the difference between a Suka and a house? Why does he build them both? And why do we focus on the Suka and the barn for the animals? So what is Sukkah is explained in the 4th parak of Yeshayahu. V'Sukkah tiyeh letzel yomam mechorev. When Yeshayahu is talking about the cloud of glory that will be over Jerusalem in time to come, it says it will cover it like a sukkah, as a place to shade it from the harsh heat of the day, and to also and also to protect it from the flow of water and rain that would come in the wintertime. So a sukkah is protection from the elements, and that's what animals need. They need to be protected from the elements, and Yakov realized that and built a sukkah. But a house is different. A house doesn't only protect us from the elements. A house actually allows us to control the environment. In a sukkah, you can protect yourself somewhat from the beating sun and from a lot of the rain, but there can become a time where you have to leave the sukkah. It's just too uncomfortable. But a house you can make comfortable. You can cool the house with air conditioning. You can heat the house. You can build thick walls or thin walls and different kinds of materials that you can use. You can allow the light in, or you could keep the light out. We can control the environment of our house. Now, the word bayit doesn't only mean house or building. Bayit also means inside. Mi bayit or mi chutz. When we're talking about the gold coating of the ark in the Mishkan, it's mibayit umachutz, from the inside and the outside. Bayit means the inside. And here we have an amazing idea. Yakov builds both a house and a sukkah, realizing that both have their place. The sukkah is where he puts his business, the animals. His business is in the sukkah. His personal life is in the house. And he declares thereby that we have these two areas and these two ways of living. What I need to know is, in my house, I control the atmosphere. I have control over my house. But in my business, I don't. Now, we actually live the other way around. How often do I speak to a parent and the parent will say, I can't really control my children. They're teenagers, they're friends, they're impacted by all the things they do. I can't control them. Or a man will say, I can't come to the shiur because my wife isn't coping. She doesn't want me to leave the house. I can't control that. What can I do? I can't help it. And vice versa sometimes will be the case. But when we get into our business, we become control freaks. We're controlling everything. We expect everything to be exactly as we want it. We're giving instructions. We're checking that everything is done the way we want it. We'll never accept somebody saying, I'm sorry, I have no control. If an employee of ours doesn't make a delivery on time and says, sorry, I didn't have control, it was raining, I didn't feel like going out, we're not going to accept that because we want control in our business. Yaakov teaches us, no, in your business you have no control. In your business, you can have influence, you can protect your business, but you can't really control the outcomes. And so many incredibly successful business people that I've spoken to, and many that we've all read about, talk of how they never had any idea of the size and the wealth that their business was going to create when they started. It wasn't planned, it wasn't controlled. They started off doing something they thought was valuable and worthwhile and fun and would add value to the world. Where it went to, how Google developed or Apple developed or Microsoft developed, that was not under their control. They could protect it as it grew, but it wasn't their control. And we need to understand that our businesses, our mikneh, the cattle, they're in a sukkah. It's our homes that we can control. There we can set standards and preserve standards, and we can control. Maybe we can't control the teenager, but we can control the way the teenager behaves in our home. And that's the message that Yakov brings us. And it's interesting that's the origin of this whole sukkah idea, that the house and the sukkah. And at this time of the year, we leave the house and we go out into the sukkah. Why? Because this is a period of the year we're very focused on our businesses. So if you think of the agricultural economy, this was the time where we're celebrating the harvest. We've got everything in from last year. The accountants have done the books, and we're looking at the income, and we're incredibly happy and grateful for how well we've managed over the year, and we've done well. And now in front of us is an unknown new year. We don't know what the new year is going to be like. Do we take our complacency of the wealth we've achieved this year into next year and try and control next year and feel confident about next year? Or do we understand that we're living in a sukkah? This is our business. This is not our home. And we can protect, we can influence, we can do our best. But at the end of the day, you can't control the environment in the sukkah, and you can't control the outcomes of your businesses. You can only influence and you can put in the right inputs, but you can't really control the outcomes in the way that you can perhaps at home, at least to a greater degree. And that's why it's at this time Hashem says to us, go into the Sukkot. You remember Yaakov, house and sukkah. the business, his cattle are out in the Sukkah. This is the time I want you to go out into the Sukkah, and I want you to realize that you're in my hands, that I have control, that I will take care of you. And you need to do what's right. You need to find the flow between the two systems. You need to do what's right in business. You've got to pursue the business. You've got to do what's logical and rational. You've got to work hard and you've got to try. That's the one system. At the same time, you've got to worry about your spiritual life and make sure that you're growing and developing and nurturing your inner life, your bayit, that the inner part of your life is being taken care of. And there again, we often think, I can't control my inner life. And we build structures to protect our inner selves from being hurt, and we don't engage with it. It's just all our activity is in the outer self, in the Sukkah, but in the bayit, in the inside of the human being, that's where we really do have control. We can control how we think, what we think. We can control how we feel and what we feel. We can control these things. This is in the bayit. It's in the Sukkah. It's in our businesses that we don't really have control. And so at this time of the year specifically, Hashem says, leave the house and go out and just remember that when you're active out there in the world, you don't really have control. I run the world. You participate in the world. You engage in the world. You influence the world. You're part of that system of the world. But just find the flow between the inner you and the outer you, between your soul and your body, between the soul of the world, the soul of your business, the soul of your city, of your community, and their bodies, their physical structures. Find the flow between sanctity and normal activity. Find the flow between the Chok HaKadosh Baruch Hu and the Chok HaTeva, the world of science and the world of nature and the world of spirituality and of Torah. Find that flow and live in that flow and encourage that flow and experiment with that flow and see all the beauty and richness and success that comes through being able to enhance that flow. That's the story of Sukkot. That's the enormous existential battle that took place on Yom Kippur between the secular nations of the world and the spirit and soul of Torah. And this on Sukkot is what we celebrate, the choice that we make and the commitment that we make for the year ahead, one where we truly enjoy and enhance the flow between the spiritual and the physical. Chag Sameach and the Moadim L'Simcha.